In 1981, at the height of her success, a country music superstar walked away from fame, fortune, and millions of adoring fans. No scandals, no public meltdowns. She simply disappeared. That same decade, one of country's most innovative guitarists met a mysterious end on a lonely highway, while another artist faced imprisonment that would have ended most careers. But for him, it was just the beginning. These aren't just stories of music. They're chronicles of vanishing dreams, unexplained tragedies, and unlikely triumphs that changed country music forever. The glare of stage lights can hide as much as they reveal. Behind every standing ovation and platinum record, there's often an untold story, one that speaks of the true cost of stardom. For some, that price became too steep to bear. Picture this: Mississippi, 1967. A young woman with a guitar crafts a song so haunting it would become an American classic. Within years, she'd vanish without a trace. Flash forward to a summer night in 1974, when a pioneering guitarist's journey ended on a California highway, leaving behind questions that still echo today. Meanwhile, in the Texas borderlands, a Mexican-American artist was about to prove that sometimes the greatest comebacks are born in the darkest moments. The 1960s and 70s marked a golden era for country music. Nashville's polished sound dominated the airwaves, while Bakersfield, California, crafted its own raw, electric edge. Artists pushed boundaries, blending genres and breaking cultural barriers. But beneath this renaissance, a darker current pulled at those who dared to swim against the tide. Fame came with unwritten rules. Record labels demanded certain images, certain sounds, certain sacrifices. Some artists found ways to navigate these waters. Others drowned in them. And a few chose to swim away entirely. These aren't just footnotes in country music's history. They're stories of artists who dared to challenge the status quo, only to face consequences no one could have predicted. Bobby Gentry, the enigma who walked away from it all. Don Rich, the guitar virtuoso whose innovative sound was silenced too soon. And Freddie Fender, whose determination to bridge cultural divides would reshape the genre itself. The music industry of this era promised glory, but delivered something far more complex. Behind the rhinestone suits and carefully crafted images lay a world of midnight studio sessions, grueling tours, and battles for creative control. Success meant surviving in an industry that could build you up one minute and tear you down the next. What drives an artist to disappear at the peak of their fame? What unseen forces shape the music we love? And most importantly, what happens when the spotlight becomes too bright to bear? The answers lie in the untold stories of country music's most mysterious chapters. Behind every chorus and guitar riff, there's a human story waiting to be told. Tonight, we uncover three of them, each unique yet bound together by a common thread: the price of pursuing an American dream set to music. And it begins with a mystery that has puzzled the music world for over 4 decades. Picture this: a star at the absolute peak of her career, with hit records, TV shows, and sold-out performances. Then one day she simply vanished. The question isn't just where Bobby Gentry went, it's why one of country music's brightest stars chose darkness over fame. Most stories of vanished stars involve scandal, addiction, or tragedy. Bobby Gentry's story has none of these. Born Roberta Lee Streeter in rural Mississippi, she grew up in a home without electricity, writing songs on a makeshift guitar crafted by her grandmother. Her journey from picking cotton in Chickasaw County to commanding stages worldwide wasn't just unlikely. It was revolutionary. That revolution began with a song. On a hot Sunday afternoon in 1967, radio stations across America first played a mysterious tale of two young lovers in a bridge. Ode to Billie Joe wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural earthquake that shattered expectations of what country music could be. The haunting story of Billie Joe McAllister and his final day sparked endless debate. What exactly did he throw off the Tallahatchie Bridge? Why did he take his own life? The mystery captivated audiences, but the real genius lay in Gentry's storytelling. She painted a portrait of Southern life where the biggest tragedies were discussed between passes of the biscuits at dinner. The song shot to #1, displacing the Beatles' All You Need Is Love. But what many don't realize is that Gentry didn't just write the lyrics. She arranged the complex orchestration herself. Her musical sophistication went far beyond the typical three-chord country songs of the era. She wove together elements of blues, jazz, and classical music, creating a sound that was uniquely her own. The success of Ode to Billie Joe could have typecast her as a one-hit wonder, but Gentry refused to be pigeonholed. Her follow-up album, The Delta Suite, was a concept album about Southern life, years before concept albums became fashionable. She explored themes of poverty, race, and social class with a subtlety that was rare for any genre. Songs like Fancy tackled controversial subjects head-on, telling the story of a mother forcing her daughter into prostitution to escape poverty. In an era when female artists were expected to simply smile and sing, Gentry demanded, and won, creative control. She wrote her own songs, produced her own music, and designed her own costumes. When male executives tried to control her image, she pushed back. She negotiated her own contracts, managed her own business affairs, and built an empire on her own terms. Her ambition transformed Las Vegas entertainment. While other country stars stuck to simple stage shows, Gentry crafted elaborate productions that rivaled Elvis in their complexity. She choreographed intricate dance numbers, designed sophisticated stage sets, and performed with an energy that left audiences breathless. Her shows at the Desert Inn became must-see events, attracting celebrities and music industry power players. The BBC offered her own variety show, a rarity for any American artist, let alone a country singer from Mississippi. The Bobbie Gentry Show showcased her versatility as an entertainer. She performed everything from country ballads to rock numbers, often sharing the stage with international stars. Her duets with Glenn Campbell became classics, their chemistry producing hits like All I Have to Do Is Dream. But beneath the glamour and success, pressures were mounting. The music industry of the 1970s was changing. Disco was rising, traditional country was fading, and artists faced increasing pressure to adapt. Gentry refused to compromise her artistic vision. She continued to experiment with different musical styles, even as record executives pushed her to stick to a more commercial sound. The constant demands took their toll. The endless cycle of recording, performing, and promoting left little time for creativity. The scrutiny of her personal life intensified. Every relationship, every business decision, every fashion choice became fodder for gossip columns. The industry that had once celebrated her independence now seemed determined to control every aspect of her life. Then in 1981, everything stopped. No farewell tour, no press release, no scandal. Bobbie Gentry simply withdrew from public life. Her last known performance was on Christmas night, 1978. She gave no interviews, made no appearances, and eventually disappeared so completely that even her own musicians had no idea where she went. The same industry that had once clamored for her attention now couldn't even find her. The rumors began immediately. Some claimed she'd had a nervous breakdown. Others suggested she'd secretly married a wealthy businessman. The most persistent stories placed her in Los Angeles, managing a successful real estate portfolio, or back in Mississippi, living quietly on family land. A few fans claimed to have spotted her in small cafes or quiet neighborhoods. But like the mystery of Billie Joe, the truth remained elusive. Her influence, however, only grew in her absence. She proved that country music could tell sophisticated stories, that women could control their own careers, that authenticity could triumph over industry formulas. Artists from Lucinda Williams and Rosanne Cash to Taylor Swift and Miranda Lambert cite her as an inspiration. Her songs continue to be covered, her style emulated, her independence admired. Yet perhaps her most powerful statement was her exit. In a world obsessed with fame, she chose anonymity. When the spotlight offered everything, she chose nothing. Her disappearance wasn't an end. It was her final act of creative control, a declaration that an artist's life belongs to themselves, not to their audience. But while Bobbie Gentry chose to walk away from the spotlight, fate had different plans for our next artist. Don Rich's revolutionary guitar work helped create the Bakersfield sound, until a midnight ride on a California highway brought his rising star to a sudden, mysterious end. The question wasn't just how he died, but how his death would change country music forever. In country music, the lead guitarist often stands in the shadows, letting the singer take center stage. Don Rich was different. His distinctive guitar sound became the heartbeat of the Bakersfield scene, a raw, electrified rebellion against Nashville's polished productions. His partnership with Buck Owens didn't just create hits, it redefined what country music could be. The story of Don Rich is more than a tragedy. It's a testament to how one musician can shape the sound of an entire genre. His guitar work wasn't just accompaniment, it was a revolution in six strings that would influence generations of country musicians. Before the bright lights of Bakersfield, Rich was a teenage fiddle prodigy in Washington State. His first encounter with Buck Owens in 1958 was more than a chance meeting. It was a collision of talents that would change country music forever. Owens immediately recognized something special in the young musician. Within weeks, Rich was touring with him, their musical chemistry undeniable. Growing up in Olympia, Washington, Rich was a musical prodigy who could play any stringed instrument he touched. By age 16, he was winning fiddle competitions across the Pacific Northwest, his talent drawing attention far beyond the local music scene. His mother had trained him in classical violin, but Rich was drawn to the raw energy of country music. He played local bars and dance halls, developing a style that blended technical precision with emotional intensity. The 1958 meeting with Buck Owens at a Tacoma restaurant wasn't just luck, it was destiny. Owens, already an established musician, asked the young fiddle player to sit in for a song. One song turned into a full set, and by the end of the night, both men knew they'd found something special. Rich dropped out of college where he'd been studying mathematics, a background that would later inform his innovative approach to musical arrangement. The Bakersfield sound they created was a direct challenge to Nashville's dominance. While music rose smooth country's rough edges with strings and backup singers, Rich and Owens stripped it down to its raw essentials. Their secret weapon was Rich's Fender Telecaster, played through an amplifier that gave birth to a signature sound. Bright, biting, and impossible to ignore. The Bakersfield sound they pioneered was a direct response to the Nashville sound that dominated country music. While Nashville producers like Chet Atkins were adding orchestral strings and smooth background vocals to create countrypolitan music, Rich and Owens went in the opposite direction. Their sound was raw, electric, and unapologetically working class. The twang of Rich's Telecaster became a sonic middle finger to Nashville's polish. Rich's technical innovations revolutionized country guitar playing. His famous choking the chicken technique, rapidly alternating between muted and unmuted notes, created a percussive effect that made the guitar sound like an entire rhythm section. He modified his Fender Telecaster with a special pickup configuration that produced his signature, sharp, biting tone. Other guitarists tried to copy his sound, but Rich's mathematical mind allowed him to approach guitar playing with a precision that few could match. Songs like Act Naturally and Tiger by the Tail showcased Rich's innovative guitar work. He developed a style known as chicken picking, combining rapid-fire single notes with bending strings in ways that seemed to defy physics. His guitar wasn't just accompanying the song, it was having a conversation with Owens's vocals, answering each line with its own musical commentary. Behind the scenes, Rich was the architect of the Buckaroo's sound. His arrangements transformed simple country songs into sophisticated productions. He could switch from lead guitar to fiddle seamlessly, adding layers of complexity to their recordings. In the studio, his perfectionism drove the band to new heights. Buck Owens later admitted that Rich was the real musical genius of their partnership. Their success was staggering. Between 1963 and 1971, they placed 21 singles at #1 on the country charts. Their live shows were legendary, with Rich's guitar solos bringing audiences to their feet night after night. The Beatles covered their songs. Rock musicians studied Rich's technique. The Buckaroos became the most influential band in country music. But success came with a price. The endless touring, recording sessions, and television appearances took their toll. The Buckaroos often played 300 nights a year, crisscrossing the country in a relentless schedule. Don juggled his roles as lead guitarist, arranger, and band leader while helping manage the group's business affairs. The pressure was immense. The pace was relentless. Rich's typical day might include a morning radio show, afternoon rehearsal, evening performance, and late-night recording session. He was a family man trying to balance his roles as husband, father, musician, and businessman. Friends noticed his exhaustion, but Rich never complained. His dedication to perfection wouldn't allow him to give less than everything to his music. Then came July 17, 1974. Rich was riding his motorcycle home after a recording session in Bakersfield. The details of what happened next remain unclear. Some say he was exhausted from the long hours in the studio. Others point to mechanical problems with his motorcycle. What we know for certain is that somewhere on Highway 1 near Morro Bay, Rich lost control. He was pronounced dead at the scene. He was just 32 years old. The impact of his death went far beyond the personal tragedy. Buck Owens never fully recovered from the loss of his musical partner and closest friend. The Bakersfield sound, which had dominated country music for a decade, began to fade. Owens continued performing, but by his own admission, the heart had gone out of his music. Rich's guitar style, however, lived on through the countless musicians he influenced. Brad Paisley, Marty Stewart, and Keith Urban all cite him as a major inspiration. The term Telecaster sound in country music traces directly back to his innovations. Even today, when a country guitarist bends a string just so, you're hearing an echo of Don Rich. The questions surrounding his death have only added to his legend. What if he had lived? What new sounds might he have pioneered? The Bakersfield sound was already evolving in new directions under his guidance. His last recordings hint at experiments with rock and roll elements that could have taken country music in entirely new directions. In the years since his death, his innovations have been analyzed and celebrated by music historians and guitar teachers alike. His guitar work has been transcribed and studied like classical music, revealing layers of complexity that were ahead of their time. The Telecaster he played has become one of the most sought-after instruments in country music history, its sound permanently associated with the revolution he helped create. While Don Rich's journey ended too soon, our next story is one of survival against all odds. When Freddie Fender was released from Angola prison in 1963, everyone thought his music career was over. But like the Texas border towns he grew up in, Fender was about to prove that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the hardest places. The story of Freddie Fender begins with a different name, Valdemar Huerta, and a different dream than most country stars. Born to migrant workers in the Texas border town of San Benito, his first stage wasn't a honky-tonk, but a cantina where he earned pennies singing Mexican boleros. The journey from those dusty bars to country music stardom would take him through prison cells and picket lines, and ultimately change the face of American music. In the segregated Texas of the 1950s, being a Mexican-American musician meant playing in certain venues for certain audiences. But Valdemar had bigger plans. He changed his name to Freddie Fender, inspired by his favorite guitar brand, and began singing rock and roll in English. His 1959 Spanish cover of Elvis's "Don't Be Cruel" became a hit throughout Latin America, offering a glimpse of the cultural bridges he would later build. The music industry of that era had rigid boundaries. Hispanic artists were expected to stay in their lane, recording Spanish-language music for Spanish-speaking audiences. Country music, despite its working-class roots, remained largely segregated. The very idea of a Mexican-American country star seemed impossible. But Fender's talent couldn't be contained by these artificial borders. The Texas border region that shaped Fender was a complex cultural crossroads. Mexican ballads drifted across the Rio Grande, mixing with American rock and roll on cheap transistor radios. In the cotton fields where he worked alongside his parents, workers sang blues songs in Spanish. This musical fusion would later define his sound, but in the 1950s, it made him an outsider in every genre he approached. His voice was his secret weapon. Rich, soulful, and capable of conveying emotion in any language, it caught the attention of industry veterans. But just as his career was gaining momentum, everything fell apart. In 1960, he was arrested for possession of marijuana in Baton Rouge. The sentence was brutal. 5 years in Angola State Prison, one of America's most notorious penitentiaries. Angola could have been the end of his story. Many musicians' careers had died in those cells. Instead, Fender used his time to study English, perfect his songwriting, and plan his comeback. He emerged in 1963 with a new determination. The next decade would be hard. Playing small clubs, recording for tiny labels, struggling to overcome the stigma of his conviction. Then came 1974, and a song that would change everything. Before the Next Teardrop Falls wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution in bilingual form. Fender sang the first verse in English, the second in Spanish, his voice carrying the emotion across language barriers. The song topped both country and pop charts, making him one of the first Latino artists to achieve mainstream country success. But it was Wasted Days and Wasted Nights that truly showcased his artistry. Written before his prison term but re-recorded in 1975, the song merged country, rock, and Latin rhythms into something entirely new. His voice carried the weight of every hardship he'd endured, every barrier he'd broken. The result was a cross-cultural masterpiece that spoke to audiences of all backgrounds. The success brought new challenges. Some country stations hesitated to play his music, questioning whether a Mexican-American artist could be authentically country. Fender responded by leaning into his identity, incorporating more Latin elements into his music while maintaining his country roots. He wasn't just crossing borders, he was erasing them. His influence rippled through the industry. Suddenly, record labels began looking for other Latino artists. The doors he opened helped pave the way for artists like Johnny Rodriguez and Linda Ronstadt. But more importantly, he showed that music could bridge cultural divides, that authenticity wasn't about where you came from, but what you had to say. The 1990s brought both triumph and tragedy. As part of the Texas Tornadoes supergroup, he enjoyed a career renaissance, winning a Grammy and introducing Tex-Mex music to a new generation. But health problems mounted. Years of touring had taken their toll. He underwent kidney and liver transplants, yet continued performing whenever his health allowed. Through it all, he maintained his sense of humor and resilience. "I've been a wetback, a migrant worker, a convict, and a Grammy winner," he often said. "Music is the one thing that's always been there." Even in his final years, battling multiple health issues, he continued recording and performing, his voice still carrying the power to move audiences to tears. When Freddie Fender passed away in 2006, he left behind more than just hit records. He had transformed country music, proving that its emotional core, stories of love, loss, and redemption, transcended cultural and linguistic boundaries. His journey from the Texas borderlands to country music stardom wasn't just a success story. It was a testament to music's power to unite people across every kind of border. Today, his influence can be heard in artists from Los Lobos to the Mavericks, who continue pushing country music's cultural boundaries. Modern stars like Casey Musgraves and Luke Combs have recorded Spanish verses in their songs, following the trail he blazed. The Recording Academy's Lifetime Achievement Award, presented posthumously in 2008, recognized not just his hits, but his role in transforming country music from a regionally limited genre into one that could embrace diverse voices and stories. The migrant worker's son who became a country music legend left behind more than just music. His story proved that authenticity resonates in any language, that cultural barriers are meant to be broken, and that the heart of country music is big enough to embrace every story, every voice, and every dream. Three artists, three very different exits from the stage. One chose to walk away at her peak, another was taken too soon, and the third fought until the very end. But together, their stories reveal the true heart of country music, a heart that beats in unexpected places, speaks in different languages, and sometimes finds its purest expression in silence. Greater than. Three artists, three destinies, one genre forever changed by their journeys. While their stories might seem disparate at first glance, a vanished star, a tragic loss, and an against all odds triumph, together they reveal the complex tapestry of country music's evolution. Bobbie Gentry challenged the notion that female artists needed to be managed, molded, and marketed by men. Her disappearance wasn't just an exit. It was a statement about artistic autonomy that still resonates today. When modern artists like Taylor Swift fight for control of their masters, or Brandi Carlile speaks about industry equality, they're walking a path that Gentry helped forge. Don Rich's innovative guitar work transformed country music's sonic landscape. The Bakersfield sound he pioneered with Buck Owens proved that country music could rock without losing its soul. Every time a modern country guitarist cranks up their Telecaster or bends a string just so, they're channeling Rich's spirit, whether they know it or not. Freddie Fender's journey reminds us that country music's heart has always been bigger than its boundaries. His success wasn't just personal, It was transformational, proving that authenticity transcends language and cultural barriers. Today's increasingly diverse country music scene owes much to the doors he kicked open. These stories share a common thread: the price of challenging the status quo. Gentry chose silence over compromise. Rich pushed musical boundaries until fate silenced him. Fender endured imprisonment and prejudice to make his voice heard. Each paid a different price for their artistic integrity, but their legacies live on in unexpected ways. When Miranda Lambert produces her own records, she's following Gentry's example. When Brad Paisley crafts a complex guitar solo, he's building on Rich's foundation. When artists like the Mavericks blend cultural influences, they're expanding the path Fender blazed. The mystery of Bobby Gentry's whereabouts, the questions surrounding Don Rich's final ride, and the against-all-odds triumph of Freddie Fender remind us that country music's greatest stories often happen away from the spotlight. These aren't just tales of fame and fortune. They're chronicles of artistic integrity, personal sacrifice, and the courage to challenge an industry's assumptions. Perhaps that's why their influence continues to grow. In an era of carefully manufactured stars and formula-driven hits, their authenticity shines brighter than ever. They remind us that real country music has always been about truth, whether that truth is spoken, sung, or sometimes, in Gentry's case, expressed through silence. And as country music continues to evolve, facing new challenges and embracing new voices, these three pioneers show us that the genre's strength lies not in preserving boundaries, but in breaking them. Their stories, though decades old, still light the way forward.